All right, so welcome to the deep dive, and today we're diving into something pretty heavy. We're going past those headlines, the ones about Bob Menendez and all that bribery stuff, but we really want to get into, like, the nitty-gritty, using court documents, news articles, the whole shebang, not just, like, what happened, which is crazy enough on its own, but what it says about power,
Yeah.
and, like, accountability in U.S. politics.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that you see and you're like, oh, another political scandal. But when you actually start digging, it gets kind of unsettling. Makes you think about how influence really works and who ends up paying the price.
Totally, and it's not like some newbie congressman messing up, right? This is Bob Menendez. The guy's been a senator forever from New Jersey. He was even, like, the head honcho over at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Huge deal, that committee. I mean, it's the core of U.S. foreign policy, the trust that comes with that role, the responsibility. It's massive. And that's what makes this conviction, all 16 felony counts, so wild. Bribery, extortion, conspiracy, the whole 9 yards.
And there's one charge that, like, jumps out at me. Menendez is literally the first U.S. senator ever to get convicted of acting as a foreign agent.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around, right?
Yeah, like, what does that even mean? Like, day to day?
Basically, the court's saying Menendez was working for another government, in this case Egypt, while he was supposed to be representing the U.S. as a senator. It wasn't just voting a certain way, it was like actively pushing policies, maybe even sharing top-secret information, and all for his own benefit.
And the benefit here wasn't chump change. We're talking over $480,000 cash, found stashed in his house. Then you've got gold bars, over $100,000 worth, plus a Mercedes convertible. It's like something out of a movie, almost too crazy to be real.
It makes you wonder how it flew under the radar for so long, doesn't it? I mean, some of the envelopes stuffed with cash, they even had fingerprints, Menendez's prints, his co-conspirators too. It's right there in the documents.
Makes you think about, like, what kind of checks and balances are really in place. But okay, beyond the shock value of all this cash and stuff, what was Menendez actually doing? What were these favors that were worth so much?
Well, the court documents, they paint a pretty disturbing picture, to be honest. For example, he allegedly pressured the USDA, the agriculture folks, to protect this halal meat monopoly in Egypt, one that just so happened to benefit one of his buddies. Doesn't sound like typical senator stuff, does it?
Not really, no. And then there's the whole Egypt connection in general. Supporting foreign aid, that's one thing. It's part of the job. But to push for millions of dollars in aid while supposedly softening his stance on Egypt's human rights record.
That's where it gets really murky, right? Was U.S. foreign policy, decisions that affect the whole world, being influenced by personal favors? By bribes? It casts a huge shadow over anything Menendez did with Egypt during that time.
And it wasn't only international stuff either. Allegedly, he tried to meddle with criminal investigations back in New Jersey to protect some of the people who were part of this whole bribery mess.
So it wasn't just about him getting rich, it was about protecting his network. Keeping that system of favors and influence going no matter the cost. It really makes you ask, who else was in on this? And what were they getting out of it?
That's a great question. It really brings us to the other players, right? The co-conspirators. It takes more than one person to pull this kind of thing off. Who are the key figures helping Menendez make it all happen?
Well, there's Wael Hana, an Egyptian-American businessman. Allegedly, he was the brains behind that halal meat deal we talked about. He had deep ties with Egyptian officials, which adds that whole foreign influence angle, really complicates things.
Right, and then there's Fred Dabes, a wealthy real estate developer from New Jersey. He'd been donating to Menendez's campaigns for ages, longtime supporter. This is where that saying, follow the money, starts to get interesting, don't you think?
Absolutely. It makes you wonder about those campaign donations. Were they genuine support for Menendez's ideas, or was there this unspoken expectation of favors in return? It definitely blurs the line between legitimate political contributions and straight-up bribery.
And it was Dabes, allegedly, who gave Menendez some of that cash and those gold bars everyone's talking about. But there's another guy, Jose Uribe, also a businessman, caught up in this whole thing. He's the one who gave Menendez that Mercedes we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but Uribe's story takes a turn. Unlike the others, he flipped. Decided to cooperate with the prosecutors, testified against Menendez, became a key witness in the case, spilled the beans on how the whole operation worked.
Goes to show loyalty only goes so far when you're looking at serious jail time, huh? Speaking of which, these guys didn't exactly get off easy.
Definitely not. Menendez got 11 years, harshest sentence ever for a U.S. senator. It sends a clear message, this kind of blatant corruption won't be tolerated.
Yeah, Hannah and Dave's got hit hard too, over 8 and 7 years respectively, plus huge fines. Makes you wonder, though, Were the sentences fair? Or was it influenced by how high-profile this whole thing was?
That's a really good question, and it's something we'll dig into more later on. Comparing these sentences to other big corruption cases might give us a better idea if justice was truly served.
And then there's the added wrinkle, Nadine, Menendez's wife. She was accused too, right? Prosecutors say she was involved, acting as a go-between for the bribes.
Adds a whole other layer to this story. If it's true, it makes you wonder how deep this corruption went in Menendez's inner circle.
And her story isn't over yet. She's got a separate trial coming up. Pleaded not guilty, of course, which adds even more drama to this whole tangled web.
Yeah, it highlights something really important about our justice system, you know? Even if a bunch of people are involved in something shady, they're judged as individuals, based on their actions, the evidence against them. It's not a group punishment thing.
So we've got the players, we've got the crazy details of this bribery case. But now I'm thinking bigger picture. What does this whole thing say about the system itself? Like, how was this allowed to happen in the first place?
That's where the real deep dive starts. The Menendez case, it's juicy, sure, but it's a window into some uncomfortable truths about power, about influence, about accountability or the lack of it in U.S. politics. Makes you wonder, how often does this kind of thing happen without anyone noticing?
That's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
You know, this whole Menendez thing, it really forces us to look in the mirror, doesn't it? Like, how does our system really work? Or maybe how it doesn't work. It's not just about one bad apple, right? This is about trust, the public losing faith. And what happens when the people in charge, they put their own pockets ahead of everyone else?
Like that saying, power corrupts. And absolute power. That corrupts, absolutely. But yeah, it's bigger than just Menendez, right? There's this whole network, the people who helped him, the system that seems like, I don't know, maybe it's too easy to game it.
Absolutely. And one thing that's really scary in this case, it's that foreign influence. Remember, convicted of being a foreign agent. That almost never happens to a sitting senator. Makes you think, how vulnerable is our system to being, I don't know, manipulated by other governments?
That's a thought that keeps you up at night, for sure. Are we doing enough to prevent this kind of thing? Do we need tougher rules on foreign lobbying?
Those are the million-dollar questions, right? And then there's campaign finance laws, how those play into all this. If you got these rich donors, especially the ones connected to foreign countries, and they've got too much sway over politicians, how do we know decisions are for the right reasons, not just to benefit a select few?
It's messy, that's for sure. And I bet it's tough to untangle it all. But, like, what can we actually do? Are there steps to fix the system, make it less, I don't know, corruptible?
No easy answers, that's for sure. But this whole Menendez thing, maybe it's a chance to make some changes. First off, we got to make the ethics rules tougher for everyone in office and make sure those rules are enforced, you know? Can't just be a slap on the wrist. There's got to be real consequences for abusing power.
And what about campaign finance? Like, can we limit how much rich donors can give? Make it more fair?
Oh, that's a debate that's been going on forever. Some people, they want strict limits on donations. Others say just make it transparent so voters can see who's paying who, right? Then there's foreign money in our elections. Should we be doing more to stop that? Keep other countries from messing with our democracy?
It's complicated, that's for sure. But it feels like more important than ever, the Menendez case. It's like it brought all these problems out into the open. Maybe now we can finally have a real conversation about how to, fix our democracy.
I think so, too. Sometimes it takes a scandal, something that shakes things up, to make us look at those ugly truths, the stuff we don't want to see. But the goal shouldn't be to punish, it's to learn from it.
Right.
And then build a system that's stronger, more accountable, one that actually works for the people.
So as we start to wrap up this Menendez deep dive, I want to ask, how will this be remembered? Will it just fade away, another political scandal? Or will it have a lasting impact?
That's a great question, and I think it depends on us. As a society, do we just shrug it off? Or do we use this as a chance to rethink things, to reform?
I hope it's the second one. It'd be a shame to waste this opportunity to make things better. Speaking of lasting impacts, there's one more piece of this puzzle. Nadine Menendez, his wife, remember?
Right. She's always said she's innocent, and she's got her own trial coming up, charged with being part of this whole bribery scheme, the outcome of that trial. It could change how we view this whole case in the long run, how it's remembered.
It reminds you that even when a case is closed, there's always more to the story. Loose ends, questions that linger, and the effects, they go way beyond that initial verdict. But before we get into Nadine's trial and what it might mean, there's a bigger question. What does justice even look like in a case this big, this messy, this complicated?
That's a question that goes way beyond prison sentences and fines, right? It's about regaining that public trust, fixing the system that allowed this to happen, and making sure that anyone in power, they answer for what they do.
Man, it feels like we've just scratched the surface, This whole Menendez thing, so much going on, so many layers. But as we wrap up, I got to ask, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What really stands out?
It's tough to pick just one thing, but that foreign agent conviction, that's huge. It's a first, right? Sets a precedent, and it raises all these questions about, like, where's the line between diplomacy and someone lining their own pockets and national security? It gets blurry. And it really highlights how we got to watch out for foreign influence. It's a real threat.
No doubt. A real wake-up call.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, even if Menendez never got caught, what would happen? I mean, decisions made for the wrong reasons, personal favors, could have had ripple effects, right?
Yeah.
Unintended consequences.
You never know for sure, but it's not a good thought. And it all comes back to transparency. Accountability at every level of government. People deserve to know that decisions are being made for them, not for some politician's bank account.
Couldn't agree more. But this case also makes me think about us, the regular folks. Are we doing enough to hold these elected officials accountable? Are we even paying attention to this stuff? Or are we too busy with, I don't know, whatever's trending on Twitter?
It's easy to feel helpless, right? When the system seems so big and complicated. But the power really is with the people. We can demand transparency, we can scrutinize what these leaders are doing, and most importantly, we can vote for people who actually represent what we believe in.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that democracy, it's not a spectator sport,
Yeah.
You got to be involved, you got to think critically, and you got to speak up when something's wrong, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard.
And it's not just about voting every few years. It's staying informed, talking to each other, holding these folks accountable every single day. We can't just assume the system will fix itself. We got to be a part of it.
So anyone listening who's feeling kind of overwhelmed by all this, you're not alone. There are tons of people out there fighting the good fight. Organizations, journalists, regular people like you and me.
And there are ways to get involved. You can support investigative journalism, talk to your representatives, volunteer, find an organization that's fighting for what you believe in. Even just talking about this stuff with friends and family, it all makes a difference.
And remember, this Menendez case, this is one example, right? Corruption, people abusing their power. This stuff is everywhere. It's not just a few bad apples. It's a systemic problem that needs a systemic solution.
So keep learning about this case and others like it.
Yeah.
But think for yourself. Question everything. Look at it from different angles. Come to your own conclusions.
That's the whole point of the deep dive, right? We're not here to tell you what to think. We're here to give you the information, the tools, so you can make up your own mind. We want you to be informed, engaged, and most importantly, empowered to make a real change.
And the conversation doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. We've given you a starting point, but there's so much more to discover. Go deeper into those sources we talked about, find more information, keep the conversation going.
Because the more we talk about this stuff, the more we shine a light on it, the better chance we have of creating a system that's actually fair, actually works for the people it's supposed to serve.
So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep fighting for a better future. That's all from us on The Deep Dive. See you next time.